the stories across pop culture, plus gives you advice on creating your own. It's episode 222. Is that an angel number? Is
Yeah,
is that a
it's an
special
angel
thing?
number. Yeah, I did
Oh, there we go.
take note of that as I opened the show.
Oh, look at that. Look at that. I was going to say it's by design, but it's literally by doing 221 previous episodes. Anyway, I am your co-host, Nigel.
I am Tazziii, content creator and co-host.
And for our behind the story episodes, we like to talk to creative professionals and practitioners across industries to unpack their journey. And today we're going to hear the story behind Tom Jenkins, creative director at Spud Gun Studios. Tom, welcome to the show.
Hello, how's it going?
Good. We're back. I should have mentioned that. We were on a recording break. We did the whole thing. People know. I mean, we've been doing this long enough. Hopefully, people know. So yeah, we're good. We're back recording all that. Yeah, looking forward to hearing a bit more about what it is exactly you do. What does a creative director do? We'll get into that. So listeners, you can subscribe to Story X Story wherever you get your podcast from. That includes Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube as well. You can also send us your feedback and questions in a variety of ways. You can send us a voice message on our Spotify for Podcasters page. You can email us studio77@mymatter.com. We're also on social media at MyMatter on Twitter, at MyMatter TV on Instagram and TikTok, and at mymatter.com on Blue Sky, or Life of a W Gamer on Instagram and TikTok, and Tazziii on everything else, including Blue Sky, tazzy.bsky.social. And check out mymatter.com. You can find out a bit more about the brand. You can get our latest manga as well, while we work on some new stuff for later in the year. Before we get to learn more about our guest, let's update you with the latest from the My Matter universe. Like I said, we have a new manga. If you haven't checked it out, go check it out, mymatter.com, or you can find us at an event. We were just at DoujinCon, where we introduced a bunch of new people to the brand. Had a moment where Tazziii was there and the book was there, and the book features Tazziii. I mean, the guy I told it to didn't seem... Oh, no, actually, there was a bit of a reaction there. I was going to say he was like nonplussed, but there was a reaction. He didn't get a book, though. But yeah, you can check out the new story. Thank you to our Kickstarter backers for making that possible. We're going to bring that to Thought Bubble. That is way, way down the line in the year, i.e. like, was it 2 months away or something? I don't know. Everything's going so fast. But yeah, check that out. We're working on some new stuff as well. mymatter.com. You can also be part of our Look Like a Gamer video game representation campaign. So this is the yearly initiative that just pushes for more inclusion, diversity in video game players, makers. We've done our snapshot of 40 players and makers that we do each year, showcasing the representation that does exist as a way of inspiring future generations of diverse talent. We've got some events. We've got London Comic Con actually coming up next. So we're going to be back at the London Comic Con showcasing the campaign, showcasing the photos, doing some gaming stuff also on stage. So we've got a whole schedule of things. At the time of recording, is still being worked out, but we will be there Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We'll be on stage Friday and Saturday, and then doing a workshop on Sunday. And then also, as I said, have our booths where you can come play games. We're going to be bringing some indie developers with us, doing some activities. You can get to check out their games. So stay tuned. Follow us on socials for more news about that. You can also follow us on Twitch and YouTube, where we do our Studio 77 activities. So this is essentially our digital platform where we host different shows with creative professionals, and we play games for your amusement, or judging from the last game, maybe not. I don't know if that was amusement. That was like bewilderment. That game. That was the game that broke us. But yeah, each month you can check out different shows. So we have the Studio 77 report, where Tazziii and I break down the latest goings on in the My Matter universe, as well as talk gaming news as well. We've got casual conversations with comic creators, where I'll speak to a different comic creator about their journey, about the work they do. So that's usually the first Tuesday of each month, but schedule can shift. So yeah, follow us. And games night, where, like I said, we play a different game, mostly for your general amusement, and sometimes when it comes to, what was it, Microworks, that was a trip. But yeah, so tune in. And if you're a young aspiring professional, or you know of one, then check out the My Matter Showrunners Work Experience Program. So we've been creating opportunities for young people aged 16 and up to work with our team across comic production, events, content creation. We've been doing a lot of that this year, particularly like events, and had people join us at Comic-Con did a whole program with that. So yeah, that's always a good opportunity for getting your first steps, learning a bit more about what you're capable of, what you might need to learn more of. So you can email us, showrunners@mymatter.com, to find out more. So now you're all caught up. Let's go behind the story with today's guest. We're speaking to Tom today. So Tom is an award-winning animation producer, director, and creator with over a decade of experience in the industry, and is one of the driving forces behind Mashed. He helped build it to a leading online animation powerhouse, amassing over 6 million followers and billions of views across YouTube, Snapchat, and TikTok. Definitely going to be mining your brain, Tom, for how you did that. So I've got my pen and pad ready. So now, as creative director of Spud Gun Studios, Tom continues to push the boundaries of animated storytelling, leading high-profile projects across gaming and animation. He has worked with AAA publishers, global brands, and industry icons, including Channel 4, Larian Studios, Sony Santa Monica, Bethesda, Ubisoft, 2000 AD, Digital Extremes, and more. That is really cool. So listeners of podcasts will know, and those who just follow My Matter in general, creativity is very important to us. But for our first question, Tom, what does creativity mean to you?
I had an idea that this was coming, this question, and like it's so broad, right? It's such a broad question to me. There are so many ways, I guess, creativity can be applied, right? And obviously in the content industry, beyond that. But I guess kind of creativity to me is like a mixture of combining, I guess, a vision for a kind of story or something that you want to tell or kind of communicate. And I feel like creativity is often problem solving as well, right? Like, how do you get that story out? How do you kind of deliver it in a way that kind of works for your audience, your budget, the expectations? And yeah, I kind of hate questions like this in a way, because in the same way that I hate an open brief, right? When somebody kind of says to me, "You can make whatever you want," that's the worst thing I can hear. It's like, I need
Oh, that's
constraints.
interesting.
I need constraints. Well, the thing is that when people say you can make whatever you want, they don't mean that.
No, that's true.
You know, like that's the thing. It's a trap. You know, when you kind of hear that, and I think that, yeah, when I'm working with partners, I like to know what the rules of engagement are, and I think also a lot of the best creativity comes from constraints, right? Whether that's the time that you have to make it, whether that's the story or the thing that you want to tell, the duration you have, right? I think for me, I don't know what you guys feel like, but I feel like our best ideas have often happened at real pinch points, right? Where you've had a real challenge and you've had to approach stuff in a completely different way from how you normally would.
Yeah, no, that does make sense. I feel, yeah, because sometimes like we work with young people, like, and it's weird because sometimes they'll be like, "Oh, we want to do whatever," and we don't want restraints. And you find actually that helps you if you guide. It helps in that case, like, guide people. But I think in the general sense, like you say, it makes sense that, yeah, because it's problem solving, right? And that is the creative part. Is like, how do you solve this problem? And I don't mean like a mass problem, but like
Oh.
you're trying to achieve something, trying to get somewhere.
Like that problem could be, how do I make the viewer feel this? You know,
Yeah.
how do I convey that this is an issue that's worth exploring or spending time on? How do I make a viewer understand that this is okay or this isn't okay? You know, like, they're all problems really. They're just kind of like solved through art, I guess, in a way. You know, that's what it kind of comes down to ultimately, right?
No, I like that. I like that perspective. So, all right. Well, and like I said, we'll get into your journey. I did want to get like because you've got Mashed and then you've got Spud
Correct.
Gun, and I saw recently
Yeah.
that Mashed was owned by Channel 4, and now, was it April? Spud Gun took ownership
Yeah.
of it. Can you, like, yeah, explain how that all works?
Yeah, we took control on April the 1st. True
Right.
story.
Was that
Yeah.
intentional?
No, no, sadly not.
So how is Mashed is now part of Spud Gun, but it
Correct.
wasn't. Like, explain that transition from someone else owning it to you owning it, and what's your, like, personal connection in that? I mentioned some of it in the intro, but yeah, give us your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. So, yeah, Mashed as a brand has been owned by Channel 4 for a number. Well, was owned by Channel 4 for a number of years, right? And there were various kind of permutations about what was owned and what wasn't, you know, throughout that duration. So, Mashed and Channel 4 have had a relationship really since it was a thing, right? And it was first a thing in 2012, if you can believe that. So Mashed originally was an end of year review show for Channel 4 Online, which is now 4 Studio. But it was
Right.
their first kind of broadcast commission. And ultimately, in some ways, it's funny because the ethos and the way that we approach content was the same even then. And the idea was to do an end of year review show, taking some of the biggest moments of the year, whether that was kind of like politics, celebrity, or anything else, and just making short kind of content and sketches around that. So it was live action, it was puppets, it was music, it was animation. And then ultimately, Channel 4 asked us, so the production company, the Connected Set at the time, who made the broadcast pilot and broadcast show, to make a YouTube channel. So it became a YouTube channel in August 2013. So yeah, my involvement with MASH has been since the very start, along with another bunch of kind of creators who worked on it. So Channel 4 were then kind of, funding the channel for its almost for its entire life.
Mm.
But in the end, ultimately, they decided not to recommission Mashed and had, kind of other, I guess, strategic goals. And an opportunity arose for us to be able to kind of take full control. And we've been running the kind of content and editorial output for its life, So for us, it felt like a really exciting opportunity, to be the masters of our own destiny, effectively. Yeah.
And what is the difference between being owned under another sort of company and then going independent in that context?
Well, I mean, I guess what Mashed was before was Mashed was us delivering the content in order to hit the strategic goals of what Channel 4 wanted it to be, I guess, right? In
Mm.
some ways. Whereas I would say that now we both control the editorial and the commercial strategy. And
Right.
it means that we're able to make our own decisions, be more agile in those decisions, probably take a few more risks. I guess for us to be able to kind of pursue opportunities that I think are quite difficult to do within larger organizations where there are far more layers,
Mm.
kind of get to decision makers. And I think it's probably a reason why a lot of broadcasters have a uneasy relationship with digital content, right? I feel like they're kind of
Yeah,
almost they're opposed in
I
some
felt
ways,
that.
like
Yeah.
yeah, and there's no right or wrong to it, but they know where they should be, and Channel 4 are doing interesting things in the space and lots of other broadcasters are as well, but
Mm.
they're weighed down because they still treat everything like it's TV, right?
Mm.
And I think that the online content is not TV content, even though that they are merging in lots of ways. I guess
Mm.
the way that content is made and the oversight that it receives, right?
Yeah, no, I get that. I'm on the advisory committee for the Children's Media Conference, and there's a lot of people from TV, and it's big learning experience for me, that perspective where people are very much from TV and they might see kind of see the internet coming, they see like YouTube coming, and but it's not necessarily able to navigate that, and that's been an interesting journey to be a fly in the wall for.
Yeah,
So that makes sense to me.
yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, we always like to know sort of how people got to where they are. So can you tell us a bit about your early life? Like, where did you grow up? And be interested to know what drew you to creating animated content. Was that something you did as a kid, or where did that come into your life?
So I grew up in Harrow. My parents are both or were both art teachers, so I always lived in kind of quite a creative house. I did art a little bit at school, but actually I didn't actually do art after kind of when I could pick something else because I actually me and my art teacher really didn't get on. Like the
Oh,
art I
really?
was being taught the art I was being taught at school wasn't really art. It was like making collages out of pasta pieces and and I kind of felt like at the time I was just
Yeah,
like, well,
put it in your fridge. Yeah.
this kind of sucks, right? I mean, school was kind of complicated for me, but yeah, my journey was I didn't do great at school. I was meant to do A levels, and I didn't kind of get enough grades to go and do A levels, which ultimately led to me going to do a GMVQ advanced at the time. It's got a different name now. I'm sure it's just as silly. But I did TV production and journalism. at the time, and I loved it, and it was great. So kind of like it was radio, it was TV. It was at West Herts College. They had like a functioning studio and gallery there. So yeah, I kind of managed to somehow survive college with the help of like a course director who I think took pity on me because my second name is Jenkins and he was Welsh, and I think for him that was good enough for me to deserve some sort of kind of like ancestral Welsh
We're
protection.
connected.
Yeah, 100%. Like he completely saved me when I'd not done a bunch of assignments and coursework I was meant to have done, and I'd missed all of it. And he managed to kind of convince various tutors to give me the summer holidays to kind of get up to scratch and deliver it all, and I did. And then ultimately, off that, I actually did well enough to get an unconditional offer at LCP, London College of Printing, which is now LCC, London College of Communication. Yeah, and I did a degree there in digital media. And this was like the early days of digital media, right? Like, we're talking kind of like IMAX, like first versions of things like Premiere, kind of like zip discs, if anybody remembers zip discs,
Wow.
apart
Okay, you're
from
going
me.
back.
Like,
Did you have like the coloured IMAX? Because they all came in different colours.
Yeah. But like that was kind of like digital video editing, which I loved. So like editing music videos. I made an interactive 2000 AD story, Judge Dredd, kind of comic books. I created interactive learning resources for GCSE students, which I actually went and took in to my mum's school at the time for kind of feedback and stuff. I made a interactive website for clubbing that was based on the London Underground map. Yeah, it was great. I absolutely loved it. I walked out of there with a 2-1 and then promptly had no idea what I was going to do. I had no idea. I absolutely was like, well, I like making things. And it was about as vague as that, right? And I've always been kind of quite visual, with the way that I work, the way that I develop. And I started looking at TV because I was like being threatened with being made to get a real job, so like go work in sales, something like that. Yeah, it was all like getting a bit sketchy. So anyway, my route in to TV at the time, because I've got a TV background, is I became a logger at Shine, the production company. So if any of you guys don't know what logging is, it's like inherently. So basically, it was my job to watch the rushes for TV programs and to write up everything that was said by the contributors and the talent, for those episodes. So
Like
I
handwrite or type up.
typed. Yeah, I'm not that old. I didn't have to handwrite. I did have a computer. Yeah. So yeah, so it was my job to kind of do that, and I've always been like really fast at typing. Like I was actually pretty good at getting it down quick, and I guess I understood from the off what makes good TV. I loved trash TV at the time. I love drama. I'm quite empathetic, like in terms of being able to read emotions and stuff. And I ultimately got to a point where the producers that I worked for just kind of trusted me to kind of transcribe what I thought was relevant and leave what wasn't. And I started doing stuff like color coding the documents for different moods or moments. So yeah, that was kind of my way in. And then basically, I think because a bunch of senior staff had summer holidays because they had kids, I ended up getting a junior development researcher gig for like 2 months over the summer. So yeah, like working on ideas for like TV formats and yeah, kind of researching and yeah, just coming up with ideas for stuff. That took me on a journey, I guess, through various TV production companies. I worked at Hattrick for a little while. I worked on productions as well. So, like, I worked at Hot Sauce on Big Fat Quiz of the Year and a couple of other things. And then I ended up working at MTV as a development researcher. And that was actually where I met a guy called Jason Mitchell, who at the time was kind of like, helping to head up development at MTV. And like, I had a cool time there. People always like me because I have different ideas, but those ideas are often weird as well. So I think some people don't really understand where I'm coming from for stuff, but they were unusual, I guess, is probably the easiest way to say it, right? And when Jason Mitchell, when this guy left MTV and decided to set up his own production company, he tapped me up to start working for him directly. So yeah, and I
Yeah.
started working for him, and that company was the Connected Set, and ultimately, after a number of years doing development work on like a really diverse bunch of things, so that could have been apps for museums, that was digital TV formats, that was kind of like transmedia style game shows, which like sounded really cool then, never really materialized in a meaningful way. And now I've started hearing people say transmedia again, like it's a new thing. I don't know if you've,
Comes in
yeah,
circles.
yeah,
I've had that.
it comes in circles. But yeah, I was working as a yeah development researcher, and then Meshed happened.
Right. And as because that's really fascinating, and I'm just thinking from a perspective of someone like you say you didn't go through A level because that's like the usual step, right? You
No, I
do
didn't go
that,
through A level. I didn't get the grades. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah. That's
then
right. Yeah.
even after university, you like you didn't know what to do, but then you ended up doing a bunch that took you where you are. So along that journey that you just said, was there ever a point where you're like, this is what I'm going to do, or were you just like, this is the thing I'm doing now, this is the next thing, and I'm just like following my interest and what I like.
Yeah, I never had a plan. I never had a plan. I never had like a, and actually I probably regret it, in some ways. But I've never been one of those guys who says, "Oh, I've got a 5-year plan. I've got a 10-year plan." I didn't. I was just like, I know I like making stuff. This thing feels right, or this thing feels like a stepping stone towards where I want to go. Right. So like I've
Yeah,
always had this kind of rule to myself when I've been working jobs and anything like that, which is like, am I developing while I do this role? Am I either developing personally, or am I being given more responsibility? And yeah, am I growing? Basically, I think is always the only question that I've ever asked myself. Like, am I learning or am I being given more? And I think as long as the question was yes, sorry, the answer to the question was yes, that was good enough for me at the time.
okay.
Yeah.
No, I like that. I like that. I think that's a good way to go about it, especially like today. A lot of young people might not know, yeah, the next step, and think they have to have the, like you say, the 5-year plan. That's interesting. So then, along the way, you mentioned a few people
Mm.
and that you sort of connected with. Was there any like advice you got along the way? Like, what would you say was the best advice someone else gave to you when you were starting out, and did you follow it?
I don't, I don't know. I would say that the amount of advice that I got when I started was like minimal. To be frank, I think one of the best early pieces of advice I got when I was in my early days, and I was a bit like loose with my, and I'm loud. I don't know if it's coming through on the mic. I'm a loud guy, like my voice.
We've adjusted the volume so people won't be
Yeah,
able to tell.
so my voice like really carries, right? And the best advice that I ever got was, don't say anything about the meeting that you've just been to for the first 40 steps once you've walked out of it. And like that has been really solid advice for me, because I'm definitely the kind of person to walk out and be like, wow, expletive, like what was that about, like, yeah, or if they didn't like my idea, maybe, like really salty about it. So that was really good advice.
I've never heard that before.
Yeah. It's done me really well.
Nice. Okay. That's not, I'm gonna remember that. So yeah, you've given us like the picture of your time leading up to like Mash and obviously, yeah, given the context with Spud Gun. Mash is huge. It's a whole thing. I mean, you talked about it, or gave some of the stats in the intro. Where did the actual concept come about? Like, what was the spark for that?
Yeah, so like that. So the actual like original idea was kind of developed by a couple of guys that I worked for, right? So one of them was called Mert Rich, and one of them was called Jason Mitchell, and they developed this as a concept. I think the concept was like, how do we take, this is like what, late 2010s, right? And this is still when the internet was just like a nice place that wasn't like monetized into oblivion, and people were just going out there and making cool stuff, like,
Mm,
and obviously to get views for it to lead somewhere, but it was a less developed market, right? And therefore more interesting things used to exist there. I feel, that you could kind of stumble across. So I think they just wanted to kind of find a fun way to kind of celebrate the creativity of lots of interesting people who were making kind of great content, like who were doing things on their own, who weren't working with production companies, who had their own setups, their own workflows, their own voice. And that was the whole point, really, and I think in some ways the fact that it was an end of year review show was just a device in order to allow people to kind of show off what they could do creatively.
And is that why you think it became successful? Like, because I always find it's one of those things that, you know, you look in hindsight at success and you say, oh, yeah, that's where that worked out and that worked
Yeah.
out. But, like, why do you think it blew up? Because I imagine there were other people doing similar things at the time, or were there not? Like, why do you think it became one of the biggest YouTube channels?
I mean, I think so. So what it was then and what it became now, obviously, like vastly different kind of propositions, right? So when if people go to the YouTube channel and they have a look at some of our earliest content, you can see like, you know, the ancient vestiges of like of its like origin story, right? Which is kind of stuck around kind of like some current affairs and news, and I think what happened was, you know, various people left the project. I became, for all intents and purposes, the editorial lead on Mashed, and I think even then the 24-hour news cycle was a thing, right? And we were trying to
Mm,
make content about news stories and events, you know, and politics and, you know, kind of current affairs. And we weren't quick enough. We just weren't quick enough, you know? Like, by the time we'd made a piece of content, that story was like, you know, had been cooked, cooled off, you know, was in a Tupperware box somewhere. There was just no way, you know. So, like, I've always been like a big kind of dork, I guess, you know, like I used to love, well, I still do actually, that's a lie. I used to love is a complete lie. I love like tabletop games, you know, I love comics, I love video games. My dad used to kind of import Gundam kind of models, you know, in like the
oh,
kind of
wow.
like
Yeah.
early 80s, like way before it was cool, you know, like when you used to get them from like the old tiny Forbidden Planet shop that's gone now, that was in Tottenham Court Road, but it was like literally like almost like that scene. Imagine a really tiny version of that scene in Indiana Jones, you know, when they go and put everything out in the boxes. It was like so like crammed, but yeah, my dad always was into that, and we always used to watch kind of cartoons together when I was little, and I grew up, yeah, doing all of those things. So like, I saw an opportunity to make content around kind of video games and internet culture because that was what I had loved, right? So kind of
Mm,
like slowly over the next kind of like, I guess 2 or 3 years, I started reaching out to people whose work I admired, started collaborating with them, started kind of working on ideas that I was excited about. Yeah, and like that's how the channel slowly started taking off, you know? Yeah, and the beauty of what we were doing at the time as well is like video games at the time were predictable. You know what's
mm.
going to come out in 6 months. You know what's going to come out in a year. You know what characters are popular. Quite often, sequels featured a lot of the same stuff. You know, there was like a kind of a predictability there and a big audience for it, especially online. You know, young audiences who were like really hungry for content about the stuff they loved, right?
Yeah.
And we loved making it. So yeah, that was the beginning, I think, of its success. You know, yeah, working with cool people, having like the channel slowly grow, and then every now and again we'd like strike gold, you know, and
Mm.
release something that really slapped, you know, and then we would see like a big increase in subscribers and views, and it was like that, you know, kind of, yeah, kind of moving forward up until now. That's kind of been its story, and the views and the subs have increased quicker, and sometimes we've had hits more frequently, you know, but that is really the like the echo, you know, for the
Yeah.
channel and its success, like that even now.
And like you mentioned, like when things get go viral, essentially, like
Yeah,
is what you're describing there. I
yeah.
always wonder when like creators like yourself and your team, do you know when something's gone viral? Like, do you make something and go, yeah, that's the one, or is it always a surprise? Or I imagine it might be both.
So yeah, so I think it's a little. I think anybody who works in this space said that they always know what's going to bang is a liar. Like there's absolutely no, and I think or the other what I would suggest alternatively is that we definitely all release stuff that we're kind of like about, and then sometimes that absolutely explodes. And there
Right.
are other releases where we're like, this is it, guys. This is my magnum opus. Nothing's ever going to top this. You know, like throw. You know, I'm going to go bath in money, and it absolutely flops, you know, and like
Mm.
they're the ones that hurt the most. They're the ones that hurt the most. But I think, you know, we often feel like we have a pretty good idea. Like this has, you know, when it starts forming up, this has a really good chance, you know, and I would say most people have a pretty good idea, you know, of the kind of what's the word, like the indicators of potential success, I would say. Yeah, you start to get a feel for it for sure.
Yeah. Cool. And like for you, and what is your role in the process? Like, what do you do on a day-to-day basis to get these videos out or get them seen? Like, what does a creative director, or you mentioned editorial lead earlier on? What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. Like, I feel like my role as a creative director is like I am the. I was going to say tastemaker, right? But God, that sounds like really big-headed, right? It really does. So, like, I think it's. I see my role as like I have been involved in the channel since it started, right? So I feel like I really have an understanding of like the tone of our content, like what is it all about? What is it going to focus on? Like, what are the things that I feel like the audience is into? What are the new things that are becoming popular that I'm also into that I could kind of integrate, and combine with the stuff that I make, So, like, sometimes I might just say to a writer or to, Ben, who's my series producer, I might just say, this is a really cool idea. This is a cool concept to explore. Like, what do you think? And then he'll look at it, a writer will look at it, the team will become involved. Other times people come to me with ideas and say, what do you think? So like I can and am are involved, can and am. I'm involved at every stage of the process for one project or another. Not always, but that's everything from initial idea and story beats to script review to storyboards, animatic, the visual approach, like the voice direction. Yeah, I
Mm.
enjoy all of it. So I kind of dip in and out accordingly. But sometimes I guess maybe sometimes I'm more involved when it's not going the way that I think we need it to go, like
Okay.
as the kind of, but yeah, I think the way that me and the team work is that we're all involved in every project, and we all. So it's like I like to have quite a collegiate approach to how we make stuff. Like everybody has the right and the opportunity to kind of say, look, guys, I think this is an awesome idea, or say, look, I think this really sucks and we need to have a think about it. And sometimes that can make things messy. But my view on creativity philosophically is creativity is inherently chaotic is how I feel, and you just kind of gotta ride it sometimes.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. It's that we're doing a project with a external organization who don't make comics, but we're doing a comic and trying to. I found a bit of the process has been me managing expectations because it's messy, and I told him that at the beginning, and it's also hard to like show concrete things in the mess.
Yeah,
And it's like, so it's hard to show progress in that sense. And then all of a sudden you got something, and then it all comes out. But yeah, I definitely understand that.
yeah, absolutely. Like sometimes an idea. I think this is the other thing that anybody who's listening about being creative, right? It is okay if you're like, I don't know if this idea is going to work, and I think there's almost like, if you imagine a chasm, right? Like the chasm is like the start of the idea is the top of the chasm, and you're like, I'm going to make it. I'm going to jump, and I'm going to make it. And then literally, I would say 60% of the process sometimes can be like, this is the worst idea ever. What was
Yeah,
I
why did I?
thinking?
Yeah,
Like, why did I do this? What was I thinking? And then suddenly it starts. There's a moment often where it crystallizes, right? And then
Mm.
you're like, no, this is, we were right. This is a cool idea, but you have to kind of be comfortable sometimes with it not feeling right. And I mean, one thing I've always kind of said to the guys and people who work with me, like, I kind of feel like when something isn't quite working, right, or it's not going in the way that you want it to. And I think as long as you always have the ability to know why something isn't working or isn't right, you're in a good spot, right? I think I would get worried if things stopped performing and I didn't know why they stopped performing. That would be like an absolute alarm bell for me, I think.
But yeah, it's hard to tell sometimes because you can have that feeling of, oh, it's not going to work out. Why did I have that? And then you get to the, oh yeah, it's worked out. But you could also get to the, actually, this is trash. we do need to. I was feeling that for a reason, and we need to pivot or just scrap the idea. That's
Yeah.
a
Yeah,
it's a tough one to
absolutely.
navigate.
I mean, and sometimes some of the stuff that we've released that's done really, really well, like we've realized really late in the day, oh, actually, this is just not working, and we've kind of completely managed to repurpose it, and it's done like phenomenally well, because you accept that it's not working.
Yeah, and because the role you described so you're not necessarily like, there might be a writer, so you might not, that might not necessarily be your main role, or
Yeah,
even like the animation. So
yeah.
when people think animation, they think writer, artist, but what you're describing is a different type of role. So what kind of skills do you need to do what you do?
I mean, I guess I need to be able to kind of like understand kind of structure and storytelling, right? I think I need to have a good understanding of like, I guess like visual direction, like what can look cool, what isn't going to look good, shot composition and framing. Like I was a big kind of comic book guy when I was younger, and I'm still into it, but like when I was younger I was like obsessed with comics, and I think that there's a lot of crossover between comics and animation, and I think that comics comics can't move. So what comic book artists are really good at is using kind of perspective and angles in order to emphasize like speed, action, dynamism, and I think that those are skills that carry over quite well to animation in particular. And I think some of the best films around visually, I think Mad Max Fury Road, I think was like pretty much like a comic if you've seen the boards for that film.
Mm.
But you can really feel something out at that stage. So yeah, I guess my job is to understand that, but also like what do I think is going to be popular? How do I put a spin on it that makes it feel like our own? How do we evolve the channel's output? Because again, if you as you look at our content, like one thing I think we've been really good at is our content has evolved and changed over the years. Like what we put out now is very different to what we were putting out 10 years ago, and pretty different even like 3-5 years ago. We've always kind of changed, and I guess that I like to think that I'm quite good at enacting like creative like renewal, and always trying to kind of do different things and new things, and never kind of trying to settle on a specific type of output or story.
Yeah, that's quite scary though, because that might mean you have to, you might get comfortable doing one thing, and then what you're saying is like you intentionally don't go and find a different thing to do, a new thing to do, and that could be scary.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, the sweet spot is trying to ensure that you're putting out stuff that you know that your audience likes while not being scared of trying out new things, right? But I feel like one thing that nobody talks about, or at least doesn't talk about it that much, is that sometimes your popularity can actually become incredibly limiting, right? Because if you're a content creator, especially if you're an individual, I feel like if you're an individual or a very small team, this problem is magnified like exponentially. But if you become so popular for doing a certain type of content, that can become a prison, right? A content prison. Yeah, like nobody wants anything else, right? Apart from the thing that they all really like. Until everybody decides that they don't really like that thing anymore, And I think that you there are many, many channels that have like died or dropped out because they've suffered that like fate, right? And because like I bounce between like, oh, it'd be cool if we did something that was like quite dark and horror focused, and oh, wouldn't it be cool if we did, like a musical anime kind of like epic, oh, what if we, like because I'm quite chaotic in the in the ideas that just based on the kind of I guess the stuff that I like, right?
Yeah.
Like that's allowed us to kind of bounce around, and I guess I work with like lots of just like talented people, who kind of get it, like the creative direction of the channel is like I guess I nominally head it up, but I've always liked working with new people and getting new perspectives, and I've kind of always tried to do that quite a lot, and I think that whenever we've got a new writer or a new animator, they bring their own like flavors, tastes, to kind of the content, and yeah, that's allowed us to kind of I think be successful for longer than most.
Ah, that's interesting. And how do you decide what topics, what subject matters you take on, or which approach works best? How is that decision made?
So, I mean, I guess there are different ways. I think it's more just like I look at an idea or in a top line, and I just think, do I think this is a cool idea? That's probably the first place. Do I think this is interesting, right? And then I start to think about, is it relevant for our audience? How can we kind of like develop it in a way that is both broad as possible to hit, beyond our audience, but also familiar enough for our kind of our core audience to kind of like get involved with and interested, and I think that one of our approaches to content for a very long time has always been like, what is the broad story and hook of the content that we're making, and then how do we pepper that with like deeper cuts for like super fans or longtime fans, you know? And I think that all of our most popular stuff is popular because it broke out into the mainstream, you know? And I think you need to kind of look at your core audience as like a springboard to the mainstream. It's kind of, you know, what you should be doing, or at least, yeah, that's something I think that we've always tried to do.
And just like for people who might not have seen your videos, or just to give an idea, can you give an example of a piece of content that you've created and has surprised you with the reaction it's got, whether positive or negative, whichever way you want to go? But just give us an idea of what the video was and what the reaction was off the back of it.
Oh no, I don't know. There's so many. I'm trying to think of something. Okay, I'll tell you what. I'll take something that is kind of semi-recent, and we're still making kind of like as a series, you know. So it has some like longevity. So like it's called Something About Amy, right? So Something About Amy was originally intended as a one-off clip, right? And it basically involved. It was like a Sonic parody, right? And it basically involves Sonic and Amy both kind of encountering each other multiple times, you know, and both of them fancying each other, but neither of them knowing how to approach each other correctly, right? Now, both of them are obviously friends with Tails, right? And Tails is giving them advice, you know, on how to kind of like approach the other, right? And over the course of that episode, it's finally revealed that Tails has actually been intentionally kind of like turning them against each other, right?
Oh,
And
plot twist.
yeah, so like there's this big reveal, and we then revealed that this Tales was like from a very old series that we made called Secret History. And I can talk about that more later. But ultimately, that was a character that we developed, we hadn't done much with for years, and then suddenly became incredibly popular via like an indie video game. So anyway, we always planned that on being a one-off, really. We never thought that it was going to lead anywhere. And I think it's something like 7 million views in like 2 weeks.
Wow.
And like actually what it touched upon was like some really relatable themes, you know, like the pressure to kind of conform, the feeling that you need to change yourself sometimes to kind of attract the people that you want, you know, like the concept of like negging, you know, and like actually it touched, I think, for a young audience on a bunch of themes that were really relevant and really powerful to them, you know. And I think that we always knew it was a really like strong, powerful story, and it had those elements, but I think we underestimated the impact that that would have, you know. And yeah, I thought we all enjoyed it. We all thought it was like a really like we were proud of it, but we never expected it to kind of lead to where it's led to, which is like there's Something About Amy as a full series is like nearly 50 minutes of content. There's Something About Shadow, which was Something About Knuckles, which was the follow up, which is over
Okay.
an hour of content. And then we are now working on the next one called Something About Shadow, which is going to drop later this month. And like, we're talking like, you know, tens of millions of views, like a really dedicated and passionate audience, you know, like reimagining Sonic into completely different like story universes, you know, like quite emotionally heavy narratives, you know. So yeah, that's one example of something where we were like, oh okay, this is this is kind of incredible.
Works. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ah, that's interesting. So you're getting those signals as people, like the views are telling you like this is working, and you know, okay, we need to go in this direction a bit more.
Yeah, I mean that's it. I mean, I think we're notorious for like releasing sequels and follow-ups sometimes like years after they were popular to start, you know, and I think it really annoys our audience sometimes. But I think, and I get it. But I think we've always had the view that we try not to chase views. We really do try not to chase views. Like, and I think that as soon as you start chasing views, like your content can become soulless. You know, when the algorithm is everything, like I
Mm.
think creativity can kind of die and it becomes kind of content by numbers. And I think that I'm not saying that to not, you know, obviously to ignore analytics is insane. Like, and that's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying like it should I feel like data should only ever like inform, you know, and kind of like assist, and it should never lead, you know. And I think that
Mm.
anybody who's making content where it's kind of like the data is king and the definer of what happens and what doesn't, you lose loads of really cool ideas that just need a bit of time to breathe, you know?
Yeah, that's an interesting point because I agree, and I think I'd say like Tazzy. I know Tazzy. We've had like the conversation you've
Oh yeah.
mentioned. Yeah, same thing. But isn't there a pressure? And I feel when we look at like larger companies, this is the pressure that in a I'm generalizing, but larger companies succumb to in a sense where they are directed by the numbers, maybe more so. But from because you've said some like these are really big numbers, does that not come with a pressure to that we kind of have to keep doing this?
Yeah, I mean, there has been a pressure, you know, and I think there are times I would be lying if I said there were times in MASH history where we weren't like, okay, we need to just kind of like, get views, you know,
Yeah,
and I
get
think
another
that
10 million.
yeah, well, yeah, that's it, you know, and I think kind of like what we had the luxury of being able to do is like I think it's like we're running multiple projects always at the same time, right? And it's kind of like get your hero clips, get your clips where you're excited about the idea, but you are also, trying to get to as big an audience as possible, right? But you've also got other projects running that are maybe more passion-led projects, that you still think has a chance of doing well, but you need those ones that you really are emotionally invested in because otherwise you just become like a content factory, right? And I
Mm,
think that when that happens, it's really easy to fall out of love with making things when that happens, So,
mm.
yeah, and I think that's why a lot of content creators kind of burn bright and burn out, like they just fall out of love with it. Their heart's not in it, and it shows in some way or other on screen, right? And it kind of just
Yeah.
fades out.
That is like the exact thing that I've said to several people.
Yeah.
So it's good hearing it from you.
Yeah, I mean, and everybody's like that. I won't go into names, but I know some incredibly large channels who the same thing happened to them, and some of them were lucky enough to be able to take a break. Some of them were like, right, I'm done with this, and I'm going to make the thing that I really want to make, and it's that or bust. And it's kind of turned out. But I think, yeah, like I think working in the creative industries it's a tough gig. It's an unforgiving gig at times. Sometimes it's like it's hard graft. And I think that passion is the thing that makes it the passion for it is what keeps you going. And if you lose the passion, you're just like, I just think people are like, what am I doing? And I think it's
Mm.
okay to feel like that, by the way, but to not confuse that with just having a bit of a block or a moment.
Okay. So then, aside from the numbers, what would you say has been your biggest achievement so far?
It's funny because it is the kind of numbers. I guess for me, my biggest achievement. I mean, I think what it is, what I was trying to say about the numbers is, it's more like Mashed is a faceless brand, or at least has been until quite recently, right? And I think sometimes
Mm,
stumbling, meeting people who got into making content or being animators because they used to watch our content or still do, I think is like incredibly rewarding. And I think the other achievement I would say is that we've worked with lots of people. We've been around for a while, and we've worked with lots of really cool, talented people. And it's been, for me, like really satisfying pulling people out of like situations in their lives that were not fun, or they felt kind of trapped. Let me give some examples. Like I have animators working for me who used to work in factories, who used to be cleaners in banks, who used to work in the industry and got told that they sucked and they weren't good enough or weren't tough enough, to kind of handle it. And I think that, we've created an environment, I like to think, where people feel valued and, we rate what they do, and we've given them a chance at kind of like doing the thing that they loved again.
yeah.
And for me, I've really, yeah, I think for me, it's like all of those opportunities that have gone through all of the people who've worked full time on Mashed, for the people who are working at Spud Gun now, for the artists and writers, and lots of people we work with have gone on to be massive, in their own right as well. And I think that for me is the achievement. Like I'm a softie really, and I like seeing talented people be successful. And when we can play a part in that, or just giving people a shot, yeah, that for me has been a really big achievement. And also, I guess it's the thing that's allowed me to, have a family, like have a house, live my life. Yeah, yeah.
That's great. And so so you mashed part of Spud Gun and Spud Gun as a studio.
Yeah.
what other types of content do you do? Because I know you mentioned on your website like heavy storytelling, and you've mentioned storytelling for you personally. So you've also mentioned working with like large brands. So how would you describe the entirety of Spud Gun and what you do?
Yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, I first of all, I should really kind of shout out like really quickly. So there's another Tom who works. I was about to say for, but he doesn't. He's actually a part owner as well. So there's Tom Payne, who is the managing director, who runs the business with me, and then we've got a couple of non-exec directors, and then there's Ben Michael, who's like our series producer, senior writer, like Liam, who is our art director and lead animator, and Jason, who's like our editor, post production, VO guy who will actually no, I'm not going to talk about his Super Mario on the Beach idea. And then Colin as well, who handles our socials. And like, I just want to shout out to them because they've all been involved in a lot of this content, you know. And I think, yeah, being able to work with them and have them with us has been great. But in terms of like what Spud Gun does, I mean, primarily we make animated, story-driven content for like video games. That, you know, that's the primary focus, you know, and that's what we've been kind of doing via Mashed, and that's what the big push is with Spud Gun Studios at the moment, right? You know, is kind of pushing out and, you know, exploring commercial opportunities. So there's that. We're actually quite heavily involved in music. You know, music has been a massive part of Mashed almost since the beginning. Some of our biggest clips ever are music based. So in terms of the focus of the business is to continue content partnerships, you know, with big publishers and developers to kind of help, you know, make content around their game in like interesting and like novel ways. It's to continue to help produce music and distribute that music as well. So we distribute all of our own music and publish it.
Wow.
And then we also are, you know, are working on original IP, you know, as well. And I think that one thing that we all really want to do as well is kind of, you know, tell stories of our own. So yeah, that's the focus, or the focuses of the business.
Okay. No, that's good to get a understanding of. And I think I read on your website you mentioned you understand the hard to reach young male audience and what they want to watch.
Yeah.
And I know lately that's been a whole thing. Like boys, young men, what are they consuming? What are they? How do we reach them? So what is it that you understand that others might miss or misunderstand?
I mean, I guess maybe what it is, right, is that we make the kind of content that we would like to watch, right? And it just so happens that the kind of content that we love to make and like to watch also happens to be the kind of content that young male audiences love to watch, right? You know, so I
Yeah.
think kind of like this is the thing, like it's not forced because this is what we would be watching anyway, right? So
Right.
kind of like I guess
Is that
it's down to
authenticity?
yeah, it's authenticity. It's like the inherent tastes of our team, right? And I think that that's what we say when we talk to, you know, kind of developers and publishers about their games. Like, we play your games, we love playing your games. Like, let us make something about your game because we're fans anyway, you know. And I think that when you and this goes to what I was saying as well about having a genuine kind of passion for what you do, right? Like, when you're into it because it's your thing, it's far less effort, you know, than trying to crowbar your way into those audiences. And I think that that's why you see so many things for young audiences fail, is because it's fake, you know, it's
Mm.
forced, it's you know, it's kind of like just parachuting in people who you know, content providers think those audiences want. But the audience can tell, you know, young audiences are like really savvy, and I don't. Sometimes I just think, what were you thinking that, you know, that was gonna like land? And yeah, without going into details, yeah.
No, I know what you mean. I recently did a session I mentioned the Children's Media Conference earlier, and I did moderated a session about anime. So we had different either creators or producers and stuff, and just talking about, because I had long been saying that the audience within that conference, which is not necessarily consumers, or at least consumers outside of a specific business
Yeah.
purpose, don't necessarily get anime, and why young people are I mean, everyone is great, but young people, because of the conference. And it often it frustrates me, and I said that to them. It's like I hear people talk about it like almost like a product, and you're talking about an audience, and obviously, like we mentioned, the numbers are important and why, but because you don't watch it, you don't quite understand. So I'm going to do this session to hopefully communicate that from the perspective of people that just watch it just because they enjoy it. And I think there's a difference in that. It's often missed, which is weird because it seems obvious to me, and by the sounds of it to you as well. But there's a difference between knowing it exists and knowing it is there and trying to use it to capture an audience and get those numbers versus, you know what, this is just what I watch. It's, you know, I'm back home, I'm gonna just relax for a bit, gonna watch an episode for this reason. And I understand that. I think that makes a difference.
I mean, absolutely. Like, it really does, you know, and you can kind of tell sometimes, even when you see like big, you know, commissions on Netflix, you know, it's like, this was like a broadcaster or a content platform saying anime is big. We need anime. And then somebody else saying, yeah, anime is big. We can kind of make anime about this thing that is also popular. What do you think? And they're like, yes, you know, and the result is like, I don't understand. There are so many adaptations of like really well known like IP and stories, and I do not understand why so often those adaptations often strip out the soul of what made that thing popular in the first place, you know. And I don't know who it's for, because it's like, well, you haven't kind of been faithful to the source material, so the existing audience is not going to be a fan. And then you're gambling that a broader audience who's never engaged with that IP before is suddenly going to love it, but they don't really know it. So, and then it's like, oh, it's not done well. It's like, oh, what? I'm shocked. I'm shocked.
Yeah.
You know, like it's really, yeah, like yeah. I mean, there are
Yeah.
many
Many examples. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of them we might have covered on this podcast in past episodes, actually. But yeah, no, I get that. So in terms of, you talked about your parents have been both art teachers.
Correct. Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Yeah. So in terms of what you do and what you described to us, did you have to explain what you do? Did you have to convince them, or it sounds like it might have been an easy transition for you to say, this is what I do now, and then being quite supportive?
I mean, I'm quite lucky. They were pretty supportive kind of parents. I think there was definitely a point though where, like, you know, like TV freelancing then now it's tough. It's TV is tough, and I think it's tougher now than it's ever been, right? And like, quite often you were doing like freelance contracts, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, you know, and like there would then be gaps in between work, you know, unless in my view, you know, you were willing to kind of like go out with the people who hired after work, go out for drinks, you know, make your way, you know, kind of break into that that clique, right? You know, and I hated it. I'm not going to lie to you. I absolutely detested it, and I deeply resented the idea that I had to work a really long day and then go out with these people after my work to maybe get more work in the future, but also maybe not. And I was like, I want to go and see my real friends who are like near where I live, you know, and like hang out with them. And like, I was very close to like walking away from TV. Wow. Like entirely, because I hated it for that. I just didn't like the expectation that was put on me, you know. So like, there were periods in between jobs where I lived at home, and I think my mum and dad were just a bit like, "What are you doing?" You know, like, is this? Yeah. But I think more from the sense of like, is this ever going to work for you? You know, is this sustainable? Like, can you survive on your own? You know, so like, they were always really good, but I think, yeah, there was a point where I was nearly like, I'm giving up. I'm going to become a teacher. You know, I remember my friends had like an intervention with me, like literally a straight up intervention, like saying, how can we help you? You know, you're not working enough, you know, blah, blah, blah. And anyway, I remember at the time, I remember it really clearly. I just said to them, like, look, even if I work on a really popular show, you're just a custodian of that show, right? That's all you ever are if you join something that's kind of popular, unless you're quite senior, you know, or you get quite lucky. And I just said, I need to be involved in something that's successful, and I need to be involved in it from the beginning, you know, so I kind of grow with it. And yeah, a number of years later, MASH kind of happened.
There you go.
Yeah, but yeah, it is yeah, TV is rough out there.
Yeah, no,
don't go and make TV. If anybody is listening and they're young and they're thinking about it, I can give other advice, but just don't do it. Not in the UK. No.
Right. Oh, okay. I feel that. I feel that story. No, that's good. Good sort of happy ending. And with that in mind, before we get to the tip, I want to just ask about success, because we always ask people because we feel like we're all protagonists in our own story, and protagonists have goal, that vision of success.
Yeah.
But given what you said, it sounds, I would say that sounds successful. So from where you are standing now, what does success look like to you? And are you there, or is there something more?
No, I'm not there yet. Not that I don't think that we're successful, but we're not where I want the business, or any of us want the business to be. You know, in terms of like our ultimate goals and aspirations for it. You know, and I think that for us, for a long time now, we feel like Mashed and now, you know, Mashed under Spud Gun, like has we haven't even hit like our ceiling of like how successful we think we could kind of be, you know. And I think that that's one thing that's always driven me forward, is like, how can we do this but better? What's the next thing that we can do? What's the next step for us, you know, in terms of like, is it the length of our content? Is it the stories that we want to tell? Is it the partners that we work with? Is it the people who come and join the team, you know? But I think for me, success is like making work that I feel is creatively satisfying, that is like, you know, loved by somebody, by, you know, by an audience, you know. And I think success for me is being able to, you know, live a happy life as well outside of my work. Yeah, that's I think success for me. Yeah, and like loads of other tendrils that come off of that, you know, like enjoying the people that I work with, giving opportunities to people, you know, who need to get their foot in the door, you know, all these other little smaller things, you know, which is also success. But yeah, broadly I would say that they are like, you know, the spires, I guess, of success for me.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, I like that. In each interview, we like to ask our guests to give advice for aspiring creative professionals. So we've been talking animated content, video games. So Tom, what advice do you have for others who may be listening and want to get started creating their own content and putting it out into the world?
Just make it. Just go and make it. Whatever idea that you've got, like, just go. Start making it. Even if it sucks, you'll understand like what you could do better next time, you know. And I think that quite often people talk to me and they're like, "Oh, I want to go to uni and I'm going to go study creative X, you know, like game dev, art, photography, you know." And I just would say that I think that university doesn't reflect the reality of the industry, right? And I would say like,
Yeah.
go out and make stuff, because you will learn by making things far quicker than you'll ever learn like through like study. That's genuinely how I feel. I think some people will disagree with me, but I think also I hire people based on the work that I can see in front of me, and
Yeah.
I couldn't care less about the degree that you've got or anything else like that. Even though I understand sometimes that helps people in other ways, right? But just go and make the thing and carry on making it, and like you will get better. Like, you
Mm.
know, you will improve.
Yeah. No, I agree. And it's amazing how, not to go into a whole rant about schools, because we can save that for another episode, but just people sort of coming out of school and almost afraid to just try things.
Yeah.
And I feel that, like, I look back at my time at school and I feel I understand that, because you want to get the right answer and do all that. And even to your point about, you know, when the incentives are this thing, that you just want to stick to that thing, and that's the thing. But actually, how you grow, how you develop, yeah, make something, try it, learn, do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess a kind of a side bit of advice to that is like, it's okay to feel uncomfortable, you know, like with what you're making and not really feeling like you know where it's going. Like, you know, I think like that's where you kind of grow, right? So like scary projects, like take them, you know, like, yeah, just take them and see where you can kind of go. And this is something that I still have to remind myself of sometimes, is like, if a project seems scary, just go and do it anyway, because that's where you
Mm.
will grow. Like, growth comes from those kind of challenges, you know, like, how are we going to make this in time? How can I make sure that this looks great? How do I deliver something, you know, that's kind of satisfying, you know? And I think that you learn far more from like a nightmare project sometimes than you do yeah, when a project goes really, really well, I'm like, great, but like, I'm the same, right? But when a project like is exploding, like that's when I'm learning, like, okay, I can do this. This is the new workflow. This is how I can fix it. Next time I can do that. You know, like you grow far more, I
Yeah.
think, sometimes from failure,
Mm.
or close failures, than you do from like runaway successes.
This is, yeah, I get that. Cool. So yeah, no, let us know what you think of that advice for the interview as well. You can always reach out to us at studio77 at mymatter.com. So before we wrap up for this episode, we're going to end with our bonus round.
So this is a part where we throw in some follow-up questions or random questions that just don't quite fit anywhere else. So yeah, so you spoke about like metrics not being the most important thing, but what metrics do you find most useful?
I mean, if I wanted to be just kind of like this is my, I look at retention on stuff nearly more than anything else. Like how long has the audience averagely watched your content for, right? And that gives a real good idea of sentiment. And then I also go and look at comments. Like I think when people can be bothered to leave a comment, what you're getting really is like a much more meaningful piece of information. I feel like, right, even if it's kind of like negative or not, right. If somebody's bothered to kind of like write, that's much more than like I think a view or a thumbs up. You know, I mean, often that's like more negative, but like it's a little bit like have you ever noticed with headphones, right? If you see a £20 pair of headphones, they'll nearly all have 5-star reviews, right? And if you go and look at £50 pair of headphones, you'll see the reviews are much lower, right? But it's because of the expectation. So like when somebody gets a cheap pair of headphones and they're all right, people are like, wow, this is incredible. 5 stars, right? And then you'll get another pair of headphones that are objectively better in every single metric to the £20 ones, but they're like, but I spent £50 on it, you know? So yeah, I always go and look at the comments to kind of see what what people have got to say about stuff. So yeah, the other thing I would say as well, going back to kind of like actual data driven stuff, is looking at your performance over an extended period of time, right? Because you'll have a clip that will blow up and do phenomenally well, and you'll have a kind of a clip that will flop, right? So for me, like looking at numbers over 3, 6 months, a year is a much clearer indicator of your direction of travel than any individual piece of content.
Also, because it was mentioned earlier that you, I think in the bio, of making content for Snapchat. Like, what does that look like? And what is engagement? What does engagement look like on Snapchat? And what is the audience like on Snapchat?
I mean, so the audience on Snapchat is is young, I would say, compared to most kind of content platforms. Our audience is kind of quite male there. I mean, one thing I would say about Snapchat is that Snapchat audiences more than any other love melodrama and like emotionally charged content. And that is the stuff that absolutely slaps for us, like in a way that it doesn't on any other platform. Every other platform seems to be hungrier for a wider variety of content, but on Snap it seems to be like emotionally charged, relationship based. Yeah, that's the stuff that seems to kind of perform really well for us. And I guess engagement is just like how much of your story do they watch and how often. But like I think it's hard for us to compare ourselves to a lot of other content producers because we produce content less frequently. And I think Snap is a platform that's quite hungry for daily uploads.
Yeah, that's so interesting to hear.
Yeah, drama. It's all about the drama, you know.
Looked at like the
Yeah.
content that exists
Uh,
on Snapchat. It's all like very melodramatic thumbnails and
yeah,
uh
yeah.
yeah. Also, like this is less of a question, more of just a comment of or thought that sort of came up as you was talking, because you mentioned that like this sort of like chaos that is creativity.
Yeah.
And chaos is also a word that's often used to describe magic. So I'm like, are magic and creativity the same thing? It was just a thought that was inspired by.
I mean,
I can see that.
I get. It's funny though, isn't it? I guess it depends. If you're talking about performed magic, they're kind of quite different, aren't they? Because none of it is. It's all planned, right? But yeah, I mean, I guess magic and creativity, I think to an extent, as words are like interchangeable, right?
uh,
Sorry, I've just thought of another piece of advice, right? Which is like never send the angry email after you finish typing it. Never send it. Write it, get it all out, check it the next day, decide if you want to send it.
I did that
Sorry,
recently.
it's saved me a
I did
couple of
that recently.
times.
Yeah.
Like definitely do it. Like it's definitely saved me a few times. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it sounds like that, and the 40 paces after meeting.
Yeah.
I feel like just that, especially if you're like quite an emotion-driven human being, like I am.
Yeah. Well, me
It's-
too. Like, definitely, big emotions are very much a big part of me, and everybody who knows me kind of knows that. But yeah, I think also like it might not even just be like big emotions. It might be you absolutely don't want to be talking down like the creative director, or like kind of like the chief's idea, and then they hit, like strategically for your career, it can be absolute suicide. So yeah, just be careful. You never know who's walking behind you. They're like ninjas.
yeah. I think as well, like I talk out loud like to myself. So like yeah, I need to remember that one to
Yeah.
even if it's to myself. And then lastly, where can people find you online?
So I have like a barely active Twitter/X account. My handle is Wimbizzle, and I'm on LinkedIn, just my name, Thomas Jenkins. But if you want to kind of just like hit me up for whatever really, I'm on Discord as Mash Tom, and you can find my email on the Spud Gun Studios website. Pretty sure you can anyway, or I hope you can. And that is, I think it's just spudgunstudios.com, but let me just double check because I kind of feel like I need to make sure I get this right.
Yeah.
Yeah, spudgunstudios.com. I was right. I should have just gone with my gut. See, that's what happens. Trust your gut. Yeah.
Gotta believe.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, good. It's been fun.
Yeah, no, thanks for joining us and giving that like perspective from behind the company. I was going to say company wall. I don't know if that's the right analogy, but you know what I mean, from
We can
inside.
say let's just say it is, and anybody who disagrees is a hater.
Yeah, cool. Uh, appreciate it, and appreciate people listening. Hope you got something from that, from this episode of Story X Story. So make sure you subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss a future episode and interview. You can give us a 5-star rating and review because that helps us reach new listeners and fans of story discussions. We're also story creators, and you can discover our manga universe online. Check out mymanga.com, see our latest manga there. And yeah, stay tuned for more to come from the My Matter universe. You can also join our Studio 77 Discord to connect with us. We've got some changes coming there and the website as well. But in the meantime, you can take part in the Do I Look Like a Gamer video game representation campaign. We've got some events coming up. You can head to looklikeagamer.com to see this year's campaign 40. So 40 players and makers all profiled there. And yeah, get involved in the events to come. As for the podcast, we release new episodes on Thursdays that include creator interviews like these ones, video game discussions, and deep dives into stories across pop culture. You can always give us a shout directly. Our email address is studio77@myamada.com, and our website with links to subscribe is myamada.com/storyxstory. So thank you for tuning in, and until next time, stay safe. And remember that we hope you like this episode, but if not, give it about 40 steps before you say anything. Take care, everyone.